Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And whether you're ready for it or not, Monday morning is here. So we appreciate you spending some of that time with us as you get going on a brand new week. For many of you, kind of restart after a lot of the folks, at least certainly my family, many of you as well, had a little bit of spring break there last week. The good news is we are jam-packed in the show today. Obviously, we're a week ahead of G-Day, so a lot on what happened Saturday for the scrimmage for Georgia, kind of those finishing pieces to be put in place before the spring is done for the Dogs. Interesting stuff around the rest of the SEC we'll touch on today, including one SEC school that it really just fans, administration, everybody just kind of at each other's throats. We'll talk about that on the show today. But I want to begin with this, just kind of fun, interesting stuff about the way in which the Georgia-Florida rivalry has grown in stature in recent seasons, recent years. I think this is really interesting stuff. We will do it right off the top here for a couple of minutes. It's DawgNation Daily. It's the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. It's presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So the overwhelming majority of today's show is going to be related to some of the stuff that Kirby Smart had to say Saturday when he spoke to reporters after Georgia's second spring scrimmage, and obviously a huge preview of G-Day coming up. I think there are a handful of Georgia players who, and I know many of you feel the same way, I am just dying to see them on G-Day. So curious about, guys like Kendall Milton. You hear some good things about Carson Beck, guys like that. I'm the list of guys that Arian Smith had to put on this list, the list of guys that I'm just fascinated to see come G-Day on Saturday. Many of you looking forward to either watching it or being there, whatever else. I mean, it's just so long right now, and a lot of what we do on today's show is going to be related to that. But would you give me a couple of minutes, though, to maybe off of the very top of today's program, kind of address a topic that's maybe slightly off the radar for the G-Day obsessed Georgia fan at the moment? Because this morning, Paul Finebaum, of course you know him, SEC Network personality, makes an appearance, as he does each and every week, on a Birmingham, Alabama radio station known as WJOX. And Finebaum said something really interesting. Now, let me give you just a quick backstory on this. Most of you are kind of aware of this, but it really kind of sets us up for why what you're about to hear from Finebaum is really interesting. If you are a SEC historian of any stripe, I think one of the things that you would just generally concede is that the gold standard rivalry in the SEC, the rivalry that has been viewed to be the most intense, the most prestigious, the one that matters the most. Now, I would say not the two schools that hate each other the most. That, for me, forever and a day is going to be Ole Miss and Mississippi State. But they are just, smaller fan base, less prestigious rivalry, kind of gets pushed off to the side. But if you want to just sort of see sort of a knockdown drag out, almost like the way in which, the Family Feud kind of turns into a brawl by the time Thanksgiving night is done. That's what the Egg Bowl typically is. But we'll push that to the side for the moment, because when you think about like the rivalry that has just kind of always had the prestige, even folks kind of outside the SEC footprint know about it. Obviously, you'd think about Alabama and Auburn, the football series known as the Iron Bowl. This is one that's just kind of famous even outside the borders of the SEC, much the same way Michigan, Ohio State would be, or Duke and North Carolina would be in basketball. And for the most part, everybody's kind of aware of that, right? People know about the Iron Bowl. Even Georgia fans who don't care much about schools outside the Dogs, they know Iron Bowl there as well. But when Paul Finebaum was, by the way, in the heart of Iron Bowl territory, Birmingham, Alabama, the place where the game was played, I guess, every year up until 1989, I guess, in the heart of Iron Bowl country, Paul Finebaum goes on WJOX here this morning and says that Alabama-Auburn is no longer the most intense rivalry that he knows of in the SEC. I thought this was very interesting. Take a listen to this.
Alabama-Auburn is no longer really the driving rivalry, I think, in the Southeastern Conference, because everyone understands the reality of it. Nick Saban is going to, win 92.3% of the games or whatever. On my program, which is a more of a SEC-centric show, if I want to just drop some blood into the water and see sharks circling, it's about Georgia or Florida, and it's vicious.
So there are two things that I think are really interesting about this, and really probably more than two, but let me mention two right away. First of all, this is an incredibly honest statement from Paul Finebaum because, and for those of you that ever watch or listen to the show, his show, you understand that a lot of what goes on there is just kind of stirring the pot for the sake of stirring the pot. What can we do to get, because let's face it, 4 hours that Finebaum has to fill, that's not easy for everybody to fill. Not everybody's going to just, be great off the cuff speaking, so it's a lot easier to fill a radio program if you've got a bunch of callers. And a lot of what happens on the Finebaum show, just to be completely frank, is designed to generate a lot of caller interest. Therefore, there's less segment time that has to be filled. That's just kind of the way it goes. It's sort of an old school radio show in that respect. And so Finebaum's incredibly honest right here when he says, hey, listen, if I really want to draw and generate caller interest to the show, if I want to say something or have a guest say something that gets people fired up and stirred up, it's not Georgia, it's not Auburn, Alabama that does that anymore. It's not Iron Bowl that does that anymore. That's not the go-to topic to get people stirred up. Now, the best way to do that, the best way to get people stirred up is Georgia-Florida talk. It's the Georgia fans, the Florida fans at each other's throat. That's the thing that gets people stirred up more so than anything else right now. And I don't know that that's necessarily important, but I just do think it's kind of interesting that the way in which Georgia fans, Florida fans kind of hate each other is so intense right now that Finebaum says, and Finebaum obviously has his finger on the pulse of SEC fans as well as anyone does. He says, listen, for now, this cocktail party is more intense even than the Auburn-Alabama rivalry is going to be. But the other part of this, too, just a quick aside, obviously, if the Iron Bowl is losing its prestige, and by the way, this has also been an era in which Auburn won in 2019, won in 2017, won in 2013, but overall, the point that Finebaum's making is Auburn, even with those head-to-head wins, just has so little personal bragging rights, right? Auburn has not really made a legitimate run towards a championship since 2017 and obviously got blown out by Georgia in that game. Just given the lack of success from a end-of-season standpoint in comparison to Alabama, the lack of head-to-head success against a school like Georgia, the other big rivalry game that Auburn cares about, this is as neutered as the Auburn program has been at any point in time in my lifetime. A passionate fan base that does want to stir things up, and I can tell you, as the host of SEC Country Live, I see kind of the same thing, that you just can't get the Auburn fans fired up these days. They are kind of, I don't know if it's hiding under the bed or, in a closet, wherever else, but, these Auburn fans right now are just less engaged than they've been before because they haven't had very much to brag about. Finebaum there on the SEC network says he notices the kind of the same thing, which I think is interesting. But let me bring it back to Georgia, Florida here for a moment, though. Look, it obviously takes two to tango when it comes to a big rivalry like this, and the fact that Georgia-Florida is a rivalry growing in prestige, the fact that the game kind of matters and means something, I do think is kind of fun for Georgia fans, even if they don't like to acknowledge the role that Florida has played in kind of making it all the more intense. Finebaum, when he was on WJOX here this morning, did go into a little bit more detail about how he kind of came to experience this Georgia-Florida rivalry as intense as he views it right now. Take a listen to Paul Finebaum again.
I will tell you, it was, I think, 4 or 5 years ago, whenever we went down to the cocktail party for the first time. I have to be blunt. I tried to feign enthusiasm for it, but you guys, we're from the same area of the SEC. That was a foreign occurrence to me. I watched it every year, late October, early November, because Alabama and Auburn usually did not have a big game that day, but it didn't mean a thing. But after going for 4 or 5 years in a row, and listening to Florida and Georgia fans talk like that is the rivalry in the SEC, I understand it more now. It took me a long time to wrap my arms around it. Florida is a member of the SEC, but it's its own entity in many ways. But, Dan Mullen understands the game as well as any coach I've seen since Spurrier. And I know he's a Urban Meyer protege, but I swear he's got I want to check his DNA. He's related to Spurrier somehow.
So a lot to unpack there. First of all, Finebaum kind of goes there from the standpoint that Florida not always kind of the SEC in terms of sort of the traditional culture that kind of binds some of the SEC schools together. I think that's really interesting. But the overall point that Finebaum makes there at the end, actually, let's do the very beginning and the very end. First of all, a little bit of a nice shout out for the atmosphere that's created there in the environment in Jacksonville. A lot of us love the cocktail party. Sounds like Finebaum pretty impressed by that. But at the end there, mentioning Dan Mullen as a villain kind of in the mold of what Steve Spurrier would have been years before that, I think that's true. And here's where I think Georgia fans need to be kind of eye-open about all of this. that Dan Mullen's villainry, is that a word? Dan Mullen's status as a villain, I think, helps Georgia a lot more than it helps Florida. Because the truth is, Mullen shoots his mouth off, says a bunch of dumb stuff, does a bunch of dumb things. It only helps Florida so much because Mullen's not quite capable of building the kind of roster that has a chance to be any more than like a 2, 3, or a 4-loss team, the way that Florida was a year ago. But when you have that kind of villain persona on the other sideline of your biggest rival, all of a sudden I think that creates a huge level of motivation for Georgia. It's good to have a bitter rival. It's good to have a rival that kind of, keeps your focus where it needs to be. It's good that the cocktail party matters. Now listen, I'd love to see Georgia win the game 100-0 and shut Florida up forever. But the fact of the matter is, the fact that a little sign of life continues to exist in Gainesville is the kind of motivating force for Georgia that actually probably makes them better. Much the same way, when you have a whole row of restaurants in a city, all the restaurants end up getting better because they're competing with each other. The fact that Georgia has been forced to compete with Florida, the fact that Mullen's such an annoyance that all of a sudden you want to beat him even worse, I think overall that's a really good thing for the Dogs all the way around. One final point on this, and then we'll shift gears and talk about something different. And I know this is going to come across as a little bit self-serving, a little bit immodest, and I apologize for that. When we started the Gator Hater Countdown, way before Eddie ever sat on the desk, the official mascot of DawgNation Daily, way before there was a golden shoe, way before there was any of that, when we first began the Gator Hater Countdown in 2016, the idea that someone like Paul Finebaum would go on enemy territory there in the state of Alabama and say the Iron Bowl's no longer the biggest rivalry in college football, it's now Georgia-Florida, that would have been unheard of those years ago. It is amazing how the stature of this game has grown. I'd like to think we have a little something to do about that. And I think the reason why we first started all this Gatorade stuff was just as important then as it is now. It's nice to have a big rival. It's nice to have someone you want to focus your attention on as a measuring stick for how good you're doing. When Georgia beats Florida with regularity, it also plays in the SEC championship game with regularity. When you punch that ticket to that spot in Atlanta, all of a sudden you put yourself on a much higher plane in terms of playoff contention and everything else. So I think it's a good thing that Georgia-Florida is a rivalry that's kind of on the rise in the eyes of someone like Paul Finebaum. And I think Georgia taking Florida down another peg once they play again this fall in Jacksonville, I think that's a really good thing too. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and glad to have you with us. No matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, radio at noon, and Athens Sports Radio, 960 The Ref, podcast, all the various podcast platforms. However you get to us, just really appreciate you being with us here today. And a big thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making it all possible. This is a nationally known company, so you get unparalleled resources, but it's family-owned branch right here in Georgia. That means you get unparalleled service when it comes to equipping your house with better, more energy-efficient windows and doors. Makes your home feel better on the inside, look better on the outside. Who wouldn't want that? Also, you can get a free, no-pressure consultation, expert advice from my friends at Pella about all the ways in which they can help you with like the installation process and all the options you have available to you. That's what they're able to do for you. Also offering currently right now 10% off your entire project or 0% APR for 24 months. So big saving chance right there. A couple different ways for you to get in touch. You can give them a call, 678-638-1496. That's 678-638-1496. Or you can go to this website, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Whether you go to the website or give them a call on the phone number, just make sure you tell them the folks at DawgNation Daily told them that Pella Window and Door of Georgia would take good care of them. So take good care of you. So make sure you check them out there today. All right, it's John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a couple moments' time. Really fun conversation coming up with him. Before we get to that, though, I do want to go around the doghouse here for a moment. And as I promised, for most of the rest of the show, we're going to pretty well be focused in on kind of what's going to happen as you head towards GD on Saturday, what has happened with the second scrimmage of the spring for Georgia this past weekend. And I got a really interesting tweet from a Georgia fan, a guy who's obviously paying pretty close attention to what's going on here. And I think this is really appropriate as we kind of look at kind of the mindset of Georgia as the spring gets ready to draw to a close. And what this particular fan noticed from the Kirby Smart press conference on Saturday, I also noticed as well. Let me show you this tweet. I want to read it to you. Then I'll play you the audio. It's Rodney Hewitt, the Georgia fan, who writes this to me. He says, hey, BA, I thought Kirby made a huge statement in his post-scrimmage press conference today. He said, quote, "We want to be a vertical passing team. And I think that's huge for all those people that doubt he will allow Monken to open up the offense. And I think that Rodney's exactly right about this. I noticed that there as well. And the degree to which Smart was clearly articulate about this, I just think is incredibly valuable for Georgia, establishing the right mindset as you head towards the fall. Rodney said he noticed it. He wrote out about that on Twitter. Let me let you hear it for yourself so you can hear what other Georgia fans have kind of remarked about this from Kirby Smart on Saturday when he was asked about what his goals for the offense are in general. Here's how Smart answered.
Well, I think decision-making, throw and catch the ball, make the plays that the defense gives you, be explosive. We want to be explosive. We want to be a vertical passing team. We're not into making excuses about what receivers are in, what receivers aren't. I think we got good receivers in, and I think they compete really well. And that'll be the expectation every day we go on that field is to be able to attack people vertically and throw the ball and catch the ball.
I mean, two things you love about that quote, and I think both these points are really unmissable, unmistakable. The fact that Smart is not going to use the injury to George Pickens or minor injuries to other receivers or injury recoveries for a couple of guys off, last year's team. He's not going to use any of that stuff as an excuse why Georgia won't be explosive. He says, hey, even with the guys we have right now, I still think they're plenty good enough to get the job done. We expect to be explosive with what we have right now. I love that sort of level of personal responsibility that Smart seemingly taking for the rest of the program. And to be very clear about what the goal is, we do want to be vertical passing. Listen, you can go back and listen to some of the stuff that Smart said ahead of the 2019 season. Maybe at that point in time, Todd Monken's still too new, still too unsettled at quarterback, whatever the reasons were. Smart was not quite so clear about exactly what he wanted the offense to be. He has kind of sidestepped some of that when he's had a chance to in the past, but not in this particular conversation from Saturday. You can see the entire thing on the DawgNation YouTube page from Saturday saying, no, we do want to be a vertical passing team. We do want those explosive offensive plays, and we're not going to settle for any kind of excuse as to why we can't get that done. A Georgia fan mentioned that to me. Rodney Hewitt sent it on Twitter. I think he's exactly right, and you hear the audio for yourself. I think you'll come to the same conclusion on that. It's Around the Doghouse here on DawgNation Daily here today, and it's John Stinchcomb coming up. Before we do that, though, let me give you a quick shout-out to my friends at Event Buzz Media. And one of the things you hear me talk about a lot are the small business owners that listen to our show, that are kind of driving around taking care of business as they are, listen to the program each and every day, trying to get sales done, trying to get things like that, business to grow. And obviously I've got a great, heart for folks who are trying to get all that done. It's one of the reasons why I love telling the story about Event Buzz Media. First of all, they are one of those small businesses, kind of a part of our DawgNation community here, but they're also a business that exists to help other businesses. They can create video production for you, whether it be an event, a personal endeavor, or as I said before, your business. One of the things we've learned around here is there's really no better way to tell the story of an event or a business, something like that, than through the power of video. It's one of the reasons we broadcast on video here each and every day. Well, Event Buzz Media specializes in high-impact video that can boost whatever it is you're trying to get done. Videography, video editing, they're professional in all of these regards. They can put it out there on YouTube for you, short film productions, music, sports, whatever else you want to do. They're able to kind of help you get that done, really telling a great story through the power of video, professionally designed and put together by my friends at Event Buzz Media. Owned and operated right here in the state of Georgia. Avid DawgNation Daily listener and viewer, DawgNation reader. This is our buddy Ben Green, who's a multi-time winner of our Golden Shoe at the end of the show. So these are just good people, dog people here, a part of Event Buzz Media. So if you need a video to help tell a story about something big that you're doing, make sure you reach out to Event Buzz Media. You can go to eventbuzzmedia.com. That's eventbuzzmedia.com, or give them a call, 423-667-0555. That's 423-667-0555. That'll get you in touch with Event Buzz Media. All right, busy show for us before we're done here today. A lot more around the rest of the SEC. A little bit more on Dan Mullen. Maybe a little bit of a hypocritical statement that Mullen has recently made. Some folks calling him out for that. We'll tell you about that. But for now, on everything for Georgia, ahead of G-Day coming up on Saturday, let's talk to John Stinchcomb right here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll sell it to John Stinchcomb here today. By the way, great edition of our DawgNation Freeze Frame this past Friday. We'll talk about that before we're done, as John really kind of got deep into Adam Anderson and why folks are expecting a big season from Anderson at Georgia this year. We'll talk to John about that before we're done. But John, before we kind of get to that, let me do a couple of other things with you here first. First of all, I briefly mentioned this to our audience before. I just get more and more excited about G-Day as the days kind of progress here, and there are a couple of guys that I'm just sort of fascinated by, whether it be, what's going to happen at the quarterback situation beyond JT Daniels, the obvious starter. You've heard good things about Carson Beck thus far this spring. Seems like Kendall Milton's kind of earning some buzz, trying to figure out kind of, where he fits to this running back situation at Georgia with the veteran guys like Cook and Zamir White returning. If I were to ask you, who are some of those names you're most excited about seeing at G-Day? Who comes to mind for you on that?
Well, I'd like to see what Nolan Smith has to do. I can't wait for this D-line. I mean, with Walker and Carter, you got some talented guys. Obviously, BA, where do my eyes go? The trenches.
Sure.
I mean, there's a lot of folks that are looking for more flashy, splashy plays from your, what's coming from the wideouts. Who's the guy that's starting to stand out? Because obviously the loss of Pickens has created some space for big play opportunities for some guys that maybe we haven't seen yet, or maybe it's a Kieris Jackson that is a little bit more of a known commodity, and he certainly did more than hold his own at the start of this past year. So I think it's just a matter of seeing who are these next names, the next faces that are stepping in are going to be these cornerstones for this team heading into the season.
So I'll admit what I'm about to say is probably a dumb thing, but I'm going to say it anyway, and that's why you're here, to correct the dumb things that I say. But I always kind of view G-Day as, and this is true for, I think, all spring games, but the one we care about, Georgia, I always sort of view G-Day as an offensive, expedition, or, basically demonstration of your offensive ability, and the defense is just kind of out there to me because you can't sack quarterbacks. Obviously, some of the physicality is going to be taken out of this. It's always hard for me to kind of tell exactly what's going on defense. Would you mind kind of telling us, just given the fact that, we're not going to see Nolan tackle JT Daniels to the ground, as for instance, on this, what we can kind of expect to see defense, and beyond some of that kind of stuff, what someone like you, who brings a trained eye into the discussion, what you'll be looking for?
Well, I'll say this. As a player, it's almost, it is certainly not the ultimate experience like game day in a normal week. You're kind of seeing it more as, well, we're finally wrapping up spring ball, and this is the last hurdle we need to clear. So different approach. Some younger guys, some walk-on guys are seeing this as like, man, this is my golden opportunity. Isn't it every year that there's some number 5 on the depth chart player that has an unbelievable game, and in fans' minds they're going, hey, I wonder if he can help us this season. And let's be honest, that usually never comes to fruition. But it's fun just because you think, hey, that kid can play, which is good for him too. He gets to have his 15 minutes of fame, even though it comes in the middle of April. But for us, I think what you can look for is, the development of key pieces. There's some players that really are seeing this as a battle and an opportunity to express to the coaches that maybe they should pencil my name a little higher on this depth chart heading into late July and August. That matters. That very much matters, especially in positions where there's uncertainty. So, working down the list in wide receiver, working through the alignments of this offensive line, checking out rotations at cornerback and your star position. What's the rotation look like at defensive end? All these things that they really do, they can be influenced because this is your last time to leave an impression on the coaching staff. And I think that's what matters most, is this is your last chance before you head into the whirlwind that is training camp to give your coach that perception that I think we can kind of count on this guy. Now, you can change perceptions when you get in training camp and maybe disprove some constructs, mental constructs that coaches have for particular players. But most of the time, you want to convince them that where they perceive you to be is accurate and you're ready for these opportunities, rather than try to sway and change a perception that, maybe I'm not ready, and prove that you are, because that 6 weeks or however how much time you have between that day one of training camp and game one, it's really not a lot of time, and it happens fast. There's less battle than most people think. It's more about, we got to get our guys identified and get them ready to play.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I want to talk about something that Kirby Smart said on Saturday, because it was a guy that you and I had I thought a really fun conversation about the other day, Jordan Davis, part of our DawgNation Freeze Frame series. I'm just of the belief that Davis may be Georgia's best player, and yet Smart also described a possible sequence of events this past Saturday of, hey, if you face one of these teams that has kind of like the quick passing game, quick release quarterback where, all of a sudden they're getting the ball out really fast, that's a game plan offensively that could neutralize some of what Jordan Davis is able to do defensively, and Smart was obviously using that as a challenge to make sure that, Davis maintains the proper weight, doesn't get too heavy, to be able to be effective when other teams want to kind of be on the move and be kind of quick. And I think that's all really fascinating, because that's obviously, you would imagine, what opposing offenses are going to try to do to Davis. To mix metaphors here for a moment, almost kind of reminds me of the basketball situation where if you've got a great center, a big man in the middle, opposing teams are going to try to play fast, kind of neutralize what that big 7-footer is able to do. This, to me, seems like the football equivalent of that. Of course, teams don't want Jordan Davis to just sort of maul people on the interior of the defensive line. Of course, they're going to try to neutralize that. That's a chess match we're going to watch all fall, isn't it?
Yes, and I think it's a testament to what Jordan Davis brings to the table. I totally understand what Coach Smart's doing in his commentary there of trying to motivate a player to elevate his game. We need you on the field more. You're a difference maker. You're an anchor, and create opportunities for the players around you. That's who Jordan Davis is. He swallows up the interior. He allows us to do some creative things in the defensive end, outside linebacker position. Allows us to utilize the athletes that align next to him. And I think we saw the way our defense has changed when he's not available, when he's not out there, when he was dealing with his elbow injury in 2020. So it makes a difference not only directly from the plays that he creates, but with how we can use and what our expectations are for the players around him. So the more you have him on the field, the better this defense is. And, our offenses, coordinators are going to try to pick up, and this is nothing new. This isn't breaking news. They're trying to figure out what are the best ways to attack Georgia when we play against them. And it certainly isn't going to be, let's run right up the middle at Jordan Davis. So if they could find ways to get one of the best players on Georgia's defense off the field, you better believe they're going to try to do that. So Coach Smart uses that as a motivator. Hey, I need you to be in shape. I need you to be a factor so that there are less opportunities that an offense coming to town can exercise and utilize to get you out of the game. That doesn't sound like a good option for us. We want you on the field as much as we can, even if it's not in your strong suit of runs up the middle.
So you mentioned offensive line earlier. I obviously do want to talk about the offensive line. And I guess here's the thing that I'm curious about right now. And I'm going to put myself in the position of Matt Luke and Kirby Smart for a moment, how I might kind of strategize this. So Kirby said some nice things about Tate Ratledge on Saturday, and that kind of echoes some of the buzz that I think that's coming out here, that Ratledge appears to be ready to play. And this was, talking about, just tough as nails, kind of high school type prospect, a guy that you're not surprised is kind of acclimating to college pretty quickly. I think Ratledge probably does need to be on the field somehow, some way, whether that's as kind of a super sub role, the way that like Cade Mays would have once had for Georgia, or a true starter, I guess remains to be seen. But John, here's the question I'm asking you. If I'm Smart and Luke right now, I may be thinking, wait, is it easier to find a capable guard than it is to find a capable tackle? And all of a sudden, I was all in favor of, hey, let's move Jamari Sire back to his natural position, more of an interior offensive lineman as a guard. Let's find someone else to be, tackle there. But it seems like right now the buzz for Ratledge may be more substantial than it is for the buzz for anything at left tackle. I'm not saying this is what Georgia will do, but if I was kind of in charge of the decision-making, part of me might wonder. I've seen Salyer play left tackle. He's certainly a capable guy at that spot, even if he's maybe best overall as an interior offensive lineman. I've got Ratledge who can play guard at a high level. Therefore, hey, Salyer back to left tackle, Ratledge a guard, and kind of go to work there that way on that. Kind of a long question, but what's your general thought on just kind of that unsettled nature of the Georgia offensive line right now at the moment?
Well, I'd say this. I think Georgia has an ace in Jamari Salyer and a bunch of face cards that they're trying to figure out how to make the best hand. This isn't a position of weakness. There are bigger question marks. I think cornerback probably stands out the most just because of unproven commodities. There's a number of players that are fighting for opportunities that we've already seen. Obviously, Jamari Salyer is a name that we know. Warren Erickson's played a ton of football. Justin Schaefer's back. Warren McClendon was the starting right tackle all year long. These are all guys that have seen the action. Now, what I think is going to be most influential and will dictate and where the rest of the cards shuffle out is Xavier Truss. If he is the left tackle that is most likely to take that spot, then it frees Jamari up to play in an interior. If he's not at that level, or if it's someone else, Broderick Jones or Mims or one of the younger guys, if they're able to play at a high level, then you're able to move Salyer into his more natural spot as an interior player. But he gives you such freedom and flexibility. It allows you to say, golly, if we get one of our tackles to be one of the best five, then that's going to elevate our game because we're going to be able to put Salyer in his most natural position. Mm-hmm. Now, if they're not ready, we've got other guards that can play that might be there. But I think your biggest determining factor is I'm going to use Xavier Truss. If Truss is ready, if he is your guy, if he's your answer at left tackle and you feel really comfortable about it, then I think you've really elevated the entire game and skill level of this offensive line because Jamari Salyer moves into the interior and a position that's pretty rich with talent and competition of guard only gets better because of the freedom that you created by identifying a left tackle.
So I totally agree with you. I think everything you just said there, it makes a ton of sense. And by the way, I still am, of the belief that Xavier Truss can be a really good player for Georgia. I'm not going to hold it against him that maybe he didn't have a great game in his first start against Cincinnati in the Peach Bowl. That's not the kind of thing that would cause me to give up on him. I think there's a chance that Truss could be a very good player for Georgia. And, John, I realize what I'm about to say is a hotter take than necessary for a game that's still many months away. But if Georgia has issues at left tackle against Clemson, that's the kind of thing that can get you beat in that game because Clemson's very good with its defensive line. Clemson's very good with its pass rush. There are a lot of really talented guys there. Beyond Clemson, you can kind of figure it out over the course of a season and kind of work towards that. But by the time you get to Florida in late October or what you hope is an SEC championship, you can take some time after that. But that Clemson game, because of how good Clemson's defensive front is, you have to at least be competent at that left tackle spot. Otherwise, you potentially lose, or you could be certainly in a threat of losing a very high profile game to begin this upcoming season.
Yeah, and I think it's a discussion that's made on that second floor at the Buttsmeer building of what's our goals here. This is an important game for us. So what are we trying to accomplish? Can we use a younger player at this left tackle spot and feel confident that we can win this game? Or is it I know what we have in Jamari Salyer. It's probably not our long-term answer or preferred long-term answer for the season, but would you feel more comfortable with Salyer playing left tackle and a younger guy in the interior? Yeah, maybe so, but if you're looking for a season-long view, maybe we're better off to have one of if Xavier Truss is this left tackle, I trust him enough, we're going to have to help him out, but I think we're going to be a better team in the long run by the end of the season if It's Sawyer on the inside and someone else, Truss, in particular, at that left tackle spot in the long term. So it's that discussion of, what are we sacrificing? Are we sacrificing long-term progress and stability, or are we sacrificing at the cost of a one-game, very important game against Clemson, or are we sacrificing long-term development for our best opportunities to beat Clemson? Hopefully that's not part of the discussion. Hopefully it's, golly, this guy's come on. He's playing great. I've got total confidence in him. We're not going to need to help him that much because he's anchoring that position. Now, that's the ideal world. That's the pie in the sky, and you hope that comes to fruition. But I think it's much more likely that they're weighing that decision of short-term Jamari Sawyer at left tackle versus Clemson week 1, and then we'll see how the rest of the season shakes out, or go with a younger guy like Truss and understand that we're probably going to need to help him a little bit and not have that same expectation that we would if Sawyer was playing the position.
I want to be respectful of your time, so let me just squeeze in one final thing before I let you go. Fascinating to hear Zizo Jalari in our show last week say that he thought that Adam Anderson could have a double-digit, he means 10-plus sacks, here this upcoming year. On DawgNation Freeze Frame on Friday, you also talked about why you think Anderson has a chance to be really a special player for Georgia this year. For the folks who haven't had a chance to see the full show, and I hope they will check it out, and really all of our Freeze Frame content, would you mind just giving us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch about what you see from Anderson and why you think that he could really be kind of part of the tip of the spear for that Georgia pass rush here this season?
Absolutely, and I think it starts with his first step. He's got elite speed, he's long, he's 6'5", and he's got the talent. You look at productivity and arguably per play and per times that he's effective in affecting the pass rusher or the quarterback as a pass rusher. He's probably the most efficient pass rusher we had in the past year. He just doesn't get a ton of opportunities, which means heading into this season, I'm sure this staff is looking at it and saying, how do we keep him on the field more? If I'm Adam Anderson, the question remains of how do I stay on the field so I can get these opportunities so that I have a chance to get double-digit sacks, because he certainly has the talent, which means he's got to be able to stand up against the run and not come in only when it's 3rd and 7+ or 4th and 12 and an opponent is going for it. So, super talented guy. You've seen his productivity when he's on the field. It's a matter of, can he stay on the field more?
John, great stuff. Thank you for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll have another edition of DawgNation Freeze Frame coming up this week. I'm really excited about that as a great kind of precursor to G-Day. Just outstanding. John, once again, thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon.
Always a pleasure. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Really great to get a chance to hear from John Stinchcomb right there. Just an incredible breakdown of what Anderson brings to the table. I love kind of throwing some of that offensive line stuff, at him. And admittedly, part of this is me just sort of thinking out loud, right? I mean, it's like, I'm just kind of pondering all the options available to Georgia. And I do think it's important to kind of, not quite be so binary about either this or that. What are the multitude of options that are available? And John does kind of a good job kind of explaining, what benefits Georgia. And I think that's really good all the way around. As we get ready to roll into our SEC Through, and by the way, as I told you before, some folks feeling like Dan Mullen may be just a little bit hypocritical. We'll talk about that. Before that, though, let me kind of explain something to you here. While G-Day represents something coming to an end, that's Georgia spring practice, the final moment for this year's spring practice will be G-Day on Saturday, it's also the start of something really important there as well. I'm talking about the Georgia Giving Week from our friends at the UGA Alumni Association. That's right, G-Day marks the beginning of the Georgia Giving Week. This is a very important thing for you to be a part of. If you care about UGA, the university, you walk through those arches, you go downtown, you love the kind of the majesty of North Campus, everything kind of goes along with that. Your time is now to get involved and support the university that you love. Coach Kirby Smart calling on all dogs to be a part of this, to really step up and support a university that's doing such great things around the community, really across across the world. University of Georgia, just a prestigious academic institution. It's the financial support that folks like the UGA Alumni Association are able to provide that helps keep that being true. So you get a chance to be a part of this there as well. Giving Week takes place starting April 27th and goes, I should say, let me say that once again. I said the date wrong. April 17th through the 23rd. That is when Giving Week begins, April 17th through the 23rd. And there's a lot of incentives for you getting involved right now. All alumni who donate during Giving Week are going to get a 20% discount coupon to the UGA bookstore. And by the way, you talk about a shopping spree. You could do some real fun shopping there in the UGA bookstore. And you get a 20% discount if you're a UGA alumnus or alumna who kind of jumps in this as a part of Giving Week. Of course, that's valid in stores from April 15th through April 30th. So great savings for you on that. Also, every donor is going to get an exclusive set of vintage UGA embroidered patches. So that's really fun to be able to do there as well. So lots of incentives for you to get involved. Website to go to, Calling All Dogs, of course, spelled the way it's supposed to be, DAWGS, callingalldogs.uga.edu for a lot more information on that. Once again, Calling All Dogs, UGA, I should say callingalldogs.uga.edu for more information on that. The big week of giving, getting ready to get cranked up with our friends from the UGA Alumni Association. Going to be a lot of fun. All right, so Dan Mullen has taken a little bit of criticism for something that he said last week on ESPN Radio. I'm going to read this to you. I'm going to kind of explain why I actually think, believe it or not, that some of the criticism of Mullen may not be quite as fair as it might seem. So here's what Mullen says. He says, the transfer portal is set up for the people that it really benefits. Mullen says, a guy that's been in the program for a couple of years, hey, I'm going to do my senior year, my last year, I'm going to be a backup. I'd love the opportunity to go somewhere else and start. Go somewhere else and play. That's what it's designed for, Mullen says. He says, I think it's going to turn into this, hey, I'm kind of a redshirt freshman, I'm not playing. I don't want to keep working and wait another year or two. You know, I don't want to be the Kyle Trask story or I'm going to be a huge success. I just want to try and move and do something else. So Mullen essentially saying that the transfer portal is going to create chaos for college football. And a lot of people look at that story and say, well, Dan Mullen, who are you to talk about any of this, given the fact that you essentially have used the transfer portal as what almost seems like the number one mechanism for how he constructs his roster? Dan Mullen is deficient as a high school recruiter. His teams lag behind not just Georgia, but most of the rest of the upper tier of the SEC when it comes to collecting that kind of talent. Mullen has only been able to be competitive by going out and taking transfer players. Some people say, well, who are you to criticize the transfer portal? But here's the thing to kind of keep in mind here. Coaches are always going to argue what's in favor of them. And this is one of the reasons why I don't think coaches' opinion should matter very much when it comes to how we construct the rules for the sport. Because whatever sounds good to a coach at that time is going to be the thing that he argues. When he does take on a player like, DeMarcus Bowman from Clemson or Justin Shorter from Penn State, you better believe that Mullen was clearly arguing something different than this is just what coaches do. This is not singularly specific to Mullen. This is what all coaches do. This is one of the reasons why we have to have people who don't necessarily have a vested interest in an outcome kind of working on what the rules for the sport ought to be, because anyone who is kind of a stakeholder within the sport is only going to argue what they think is their best interest overall. By the way, the other point here that Mullen brings up, I think is actually a fairly good one, is that I do think that there's a big difference between a guy who transfers after being in a program for a couple of years compared to a guy who transfers, kind of right away upon entering a program. That really the thing that creates the most instability for the sport are those guys who transfer quickly after not really having much of a chance to play yet. Those are the guys who I think really threaten the stability of the sport. And those are the things in which I don't think there's anything wrong with college football having some sort of rule system in place, especially at the intra-conference level. I don't think there's anything wrong with college football or college athletics in general, having some sort of rule system in place that keeps the sport from descending in the kind of chaos that Mullen sort of describes there. I mean, the general tone of what Mullen says, I actually kind of agree with. I think that you don't have a sport if you ignore your rules. To have a sport, you have to have some rules. That's the thing that makes it a sport. And when college football and college athletics in general just seems content to just toss its rules aside anytime it wants to because it feels good to grant transfers, I do think that you're potentially creating a level of chaos for the sport. I don't think that Mullen is quite wrong on that. I'd be in favor of some sort of compromise on this where, as Mullen describes, late in your career, if you haven't been playing, if you have a chance to go play somewhere else, obviously, being someone who wants to support players as much as I can, I'd be in favor of doing that. but one of these things where guys who just signed somewhere are bouncing out of the portal because they're not starting right away. That's the kind of nonsense that I think that college football has an obligation to defend itself from and kind of fight back on, because the people who push that kind of stuff are just eroding the integrity of the sport all the way around. This is kind of interesting. So there is controversy at the University of South Carolina right now. Now, we told you this last week. Darla Moore has spoken out about the university. This is the big-time booster donor, very rich lady in South Carolina. She was unhappy because no one from South Carolina wrote a letter to her when her mother died. It certainly seems like there's more to that story than just the specific situation there. It seems like she may be feuding with the university president. And some of this also kind of spills over into like the athletic world there as well, even though Darla Moore is not a huge sports fan that I'm understanding of. But in addition to kind of an embattled president there who seems to be, at odds with some of his own faculty members, things like that, you also have a little bit of an embattled athletic director there as well. The athletic director of South Carolina is Ray Tanner, the former baseball coach. And folks are unhappy with Tanner because of, the end of the Will Muschamp era. Maybe a lot of South Carolina fans wanted to move on from Frank Martin as basketball coach. Tanner made the decision not to do that. So some of the key personnel decisions he's been dealing with have been really putting him at odds with a lot of the South Carolina fans. And then there's this. So according to some South Carolina fans, young fans, I think maybe even students, they say they were ejected from the baseball park this past weekend because they were arguing with an umpire, basically saying the umpire's blind, the kind of things that certainly Braves fans understand that sometimes fans do. 18 fans reportedly ejected from the ballpark. Now, the SEC is disputing that claim, but the way it's been kind of passed around is that there's a code of conduct being given to South Carolina baseball fans that basically say we want a family-friendly atmosphere, and one of the guys who was ejected says he wasn't being supportive enough of the umpires, and that's why he was kind of kicked out. Now, this kind of lands with me two different places. First of all, I love the atmosphere in SEC ballparks for baseball. The way the fans kind of get after each other and kind of go after the opposing team sometimes makes for a fun environment. I also have young kids, and I appreciate family-friendly stuff there as well. How you kind of split the difference on that and kind of create the kind of thing that young families want to be a part of, and also fans who want to have some fun and make a raucous environment. Many of you saw the Ole Miss thing they're doing now, throwing the beers up in the air in the outfield after the home runs and whatnot. How do you split the difference with all that? Who really knows? But Ray Tanner, the South Carolina athletic director, who's already in trouble with his fans in some respects, kind of dealing with the fans on a different issue now. The atmosphere around the University of South Carolina at this moment is very, very strange. That's kind of the bottom line on that. Two other quick things here very quickly. So watching the Masters over the weekend, it was nice to see this event taking place back in the spring again. I think most would agree with that. But it still didn't quite feel normal to me, just given the small number of patrons who were allowed to attend. And listen, it's better than nothing, but you're certainly looking forward to that event having the roars and the huge, galleries that you're going to used to seeing there. It kind of makes me wonder if this is the last event that we'll see of a major sporting variety that's going to have so few fans. As you head towards the start of college football in the fall, you certainly get the impression that more fans are kind of on the way here, and I think that's probably kind of a good thing all the way around, that by the time we're talking about SEC football this fall, you're going to see a lot more fans in those stadiums for that than you saw for the Masters this past weekend. Will make that your SEC through. By the way, speaking of college baseball, as we kind of get back to the Dogs here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, what an incredible job by the Diamond Dogs taking the series against number 1 ranked Vanderbilt, going to the wire with Leiter in a game they lost, taking out Rocker in the first game of the series, come back and getting the deciding game in Game 3. Incredible job all the way around there. A real fun weekend of baseball for the Diamond Dogs up there in Nashville against the Vandy boys, they're like to be called. And I guess Georgia basketball news here as well, bringing in Jalen Ingram to the program, 1,000-point scorer, I guess, at Florida Atlantic, now here at UGA. Of course, many of you saw Tamani Kamara now at Dayton, Ty Fagan now at Ole Miss. There are like 1,200 names in the basketball transfer portal right now. That entire sport is a mess, but Georgia doing its part, try to keep up, bringing in Jalen Ingram to the program there as well. So as we wrap up here today, I want to give out a golden shoe, and I've been meaning to get this on the show for a while. I told you last week, I've just been crazy behind when it comes to my golden shoes. Let me give a shout-out to a DawgNation Daily viewer who sent this to us. Can we show this on the screen? Yeah, Chuck Billingham shares this. This coming from the SportsCenter official account. You may remember former Georgia tight end Jay Rome, product of Valdosta. In his boxing debut, is it Jack Dempsey and Gene Tunney? Is that the fight that's famous for the guy getting knocked out of the ring? Rome knocks this dude out of the ring. I hope he's okay, first of all. But what a right hand from the former Georgia tight end. So I'm going to give Chuck Billingham the golden shoe today for sharing a video that's a few days old by now, but an incredible performance by the former Georgia tight end Jay Rome in his boxing debut. Pretty amazing. By the way, lousy stinking Gators. How about a Gatorhead countdown? 201 days from right now. Georgia goes to Jacksonville, get some revenge over the Gators. We'll see you tomorrow. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella, window and door of Georgia. Talk to you then, everybody. And on video, time now for our RS Andrews cool down. The RS stands for Rapid Service. They will take good care of you for your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that is promised. Okay, can I do something slightly self-serving? Then we'll take a bunch of comments. And I apologize. This is as self-serving as it gets. I need y'all to tell me something. Don't mess with me on this, please. So I'm virtually colorblind. So this is a white pullover that I'm wearing today. And I don't usually wear white on the show just because it kind of looks weird on screen sometimes. But it just came back from the dry cleaner. Now, there's a monitor to my left here where I can see myself. It sort of seems like does this look like cream, like faded white to y'all? Because it kind of does to me. I'm wondering if the dry cleaner messed up my shirt. Y'all tell me if this does not look white to you. Because I don't know if it's just the color is weird because of all the lights in here or what. But y'all tell me if I'm wrong about that. And as I said before, I apologize for being self-serving on that front. All right, let's get some of your comments. I'll pull these up on my phone. We'll just kind of do that for today again. And by the way, always don't forget, you're always free to send those Gator Hater submissions. We're glad to have those as a part of whatever you got going on there. All right, on the Facebook side of things to begin things, and I'm going to try not to stay on any one comment section too long on this. We'll see if we can move through these kind of quick here. All right, over here on Facebook for a moment. Matt Rukavina says, my wife would call that beige with the peach sorbet persuasion. Yeah, that's not what it's supposed to be. Clint Hayes says it looks cream. Yeah, so the dry cleaners ruined this shirt. Good to know that. Steve Bond says, so you think the Clemson defensive linebackers are better than what our offensive line faces in practice? No, not necessarily. I do think that's one of the strengths of the Clemson team that's been in the playoff every year since 2015. I do kind of think that's the case, but not necessarily better than what Georgia brings to the table. I just think, look, I've had other Georgia players kind of say this over the years. I do think there is something to be said for facing a team that you haven't seen a lot, right? I mean, you do just kind of get used to, facing the same team over and over again. It's sort of like if you do the same exercise every single day. If all you ever do is bench press, eventually the bench press gets easier, but it's not necessarily that you're getting that much stronger. It's just you've kind of gotten used to that exercise. I think facing the same, defense over and over again, I do think eventually you kind of get a little bit used to what they bring to the table, whereas facing a new opponent is always an entirely different set of circumstances. Stacy Bloom, says it's cream-colored. Phil Rogers says, I love the little helmet on your sweater. So I will say that I had this specially made, and what I was trying to go for was like the 1980 style coaching shirt. Back then, if you go back and see Eric Russell, Vince Dooley back in the day, they had the helmet logo on their coaching shirts, and that was kind of like the vibe I was trying to go for with this. Phil Sorrow says it looks cream. Hugh Nash says, did you see my tweet about Gus Billboard taking a shot at Mullen in Florida? Yeah, so I think, Hugh, the other day we referenced you for Golden Shoe, but I didn't have the tweet to show because, as I said before, I was behind last week. But we did give kind of a veiled shout out to you for Golden Shoe on that the other day. I thought that was very funny. I'm really glad you shared it. Yeah, so it's not. So Keith Fold says it's not supposed to be cream, but he's right. The paper on the desk is as white as it could be. The shirt, by comparison, is not. Pretty disappointing. Because this wasn't cheap. Jonathan Moore says we need a proper scrimmage before Clemson. I mean, I don't mind playing the big team week one. This notion that you have to have. I think we're even seeing in the NFL kind of a move to kind of get away from some of this from the preseason games. This idea that you got to have a whole bunch of lead in to play the big game. I'm sort of fine with let's buckle up, let's go to work, and let's see if we can get it done with what you have. But it is going to be a stiff challenge. Phil Rogers said I had this shirt in 1980. Phil had the shirt back in 1980. Yeah, I love those things. Those coaching shirts. I mean, honestly, like I'm always going to be kind of a traditionalist, so pretty much anything that like Irk Russell would have wore I thought was kind of cool. But any of that like coaching, like, the football helmet coaching stuff, a lot of the stuff from back then are really fun. That's one of the reasons why I always like to watch, they'll show like the 76 Sugar Bowl on ESPN Classic sometime, or like obviously some of the stuff in the Herschel era. I'm always fascinated by what the fans are wearing. I'm also kind of fascinated by what still looks like Georgia football and what's not really kind of a part of the tradition back then that kind of exists in the stadium today. But yeah, and Hargett Library does some of this kind of stuff too, where they'll like tweet out students on campus from like various eras. I'm just always kind of fascinated by what people are wearing, in that kind of world. Gary Stokes says it's a smart decision to play a big team early because it shows us where we're at. Yeah, I mean, it's a great measuring stick. And, I mean, nothing wrong with just kind of getting up and getting ready to go for a big game like that. HR Picking Stuff says, my biggest concerns are center and left tackle. Need better than average play to be a playoff team. What say you? I'd say I'm more concerned about left tackle than I am center. Just because you have an unanswered question doesn't mean that you don't have an emphatic answer that's on the way. I mean, between Warren Erickson, who we've seen start and play at a high level, and he started the Sugar Bowl 2 years ago, between Cedric Von Pran, who I've just never heard anybody say anything other than Von Pran's a sure thing. Von Pran's going to be a good player at Georgia. It's just a matter of when it starts happening. Between Von Pran and Erickson, I'd be surprised if Georgia doesn't have a good center. I know people talk about Austin Blasky potentially in that role too, but I'm going to go with just those two for now, SVP and Erickson. I feel like Georgia is probably fine at center. Now, your point is, you may need to be better than fine, and I would say that I'm trying to be conservative in my language here, that I'm assuming that Georgia has a pretty good center between those two. I think the left tackle is one of those things where, as I said before, I mean, hotter take than required several months ahead, but it could get you beat against Clemson if you're not solid there on that edge, blindside protection for JT Daniels. That could affect the entire rhythm of the passing game. Remember the Cincinnati Bengals meme we showed on the show the other day? That could be a factor there. So I'm more concerned about left tackle than I am center, even though for now they are both unanswered questions. Stephen Venanzi, I'd love to see you on Saturday. Yeah, we should be certainly at the UGA bookstore after the game and in and around the bookstore area before the game there as well. George Monahan's laughing at my pronunciation of Von Pran. Is that not? Did I mispronounce? Are you going Van Pran on that? Maybe that's right. Let's see what else. Jim McLaughlin. I mean, look, I'm just not quite ready to say that Truss could not be a good left tackle. I'm not going to hold it. I mean, this is what we do, right? It's like, when a guy doesn't play, we wonder why he hasn't played. He plays one time. If it doesn't go well, we never want to see him again. And by we, I mean Georgia fans, not necessarily myself in that discussion. I just think it's important not to throw him aside too quickly. I mean, Cincinnati's pretty good defense. First game in a situation like that, not an easy scenario for him. So I'm not going to throw him away because of that too quick. Jay Shipes, boy, that is not a good description. Not a good description. Frank Patterson, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. William Ray, yes, it is. Yes, it is, William Ray. Cody Ledoux says, I think Alabama deserves the live stream for ESPN, but I'm surprised Georgia didn't change their time of G-Day game to have their event live. Are you surprised or no? I just don't think ESPN wants college football on Saturday night. I'm guessing they probably have an NBA game or something like that. I just think way too much was made of all of this. Now, I don't know why they're doing so many of the streaming games this year as opposed to having them on the regular SEC network. My guess is some of this may be financially related. ESPN has fairly quietly tried to go a little bit on the cheap with some of its sports telecasts. And sometimes you notice, sometimes you might not. But they've pretty quietly tried to save money where they can. This may be an example of that they just weren't looking to make spring games be all that big of a thing this year. Mike D., thank you for the analysis on that. I mean, I wouldn't put it past the lights to kind of make this thing look so cream because these lights are a little, kind of wonky anyway. Mike D on the subject of the Braves umpires last night. What a disaster, man. What a disaster. So it's kind of funny, and I'll make this really, really quick. A lot of people are kind of coming to a point that I've been at for a long time. And I think a lot of people, when I first started saying this years ago, thought I was being unnecessarily contrarian. I am not in favor of replay really in any sport for any reason. I don't think replay makes officiating better. I think that when it comes to kind of a bang-bang play, the kind of thin slice thought process that the umpire or the official goes through in that moment is just as good as half the time these guys, watching the replay over and over again. That drags on the game, makes everything slow. I think in the sport of college football, I think it takes too much pressure off the officials to get it right on the field in the moment. I think the officiating in college football has become calling games with the idea of replay in mind, basically, taking pressure off them to feel like they need to get it right in the moment, which I think is not a good thing. Now, the baseball thing's totally different. This is, look, the umpires are so protected in Major League Baseball. So thin-skinned, and they're just going to go out of their way to do anything to keep them from making them look bad. Same way with like some of these former NFL referees that come on TV that never say a bad thing about the guys who are currently calling the game. That's just generally the way that pro sports treats its officials, Major League Baseball umpires included. The idea of replay in Major League Baseball is essentially for show only. It's something to be done to make you think that they're trying to get the call right, but the actual replay system in Major League Baseball does not overturn the calls because they don't want to show up the umpires. The umpires are just too thin-skinned to have their work called into question. It's grotesque, but it's true. But the larger point, and to kind of bring it back to college football, is I'm actually not in favor of really any kind of officiating replay situation because I'm not convinced that it makes anything better. A couple of more here. Jim McLaughlin, thanks for the kind words, by the way. Let's see a couple more here. I'm going to bounce back over to Facebook here for a moment. By the way, good job by me toggling back and forth here pretty quick. Oh, yeah, Jay Shipes asking about Tyson Summers. I meant to say this during the regular show, and I just forgot to. So the whole thing that kind of got the conversation with Finebaum on WJOX started was he was asked about Tyson Summers going to Florida as an analyst. I should have mentioned this. I just honestly just completely forgot to. So I don't think that's necessarily that big of a deal, right? I mean, in fact, I think this is one of the things that sometimes makes rivalries less intense. Like Bobo and Smart are still good friends, even though Mike's working at Auburn now. I'm guessing that Tyson Summers and Kirby are still really good friends, even though Summers is working at Florida. It was described, by some as, a shot across the bow that Tyson Summers is now working at Florida. I don't see it that way. I think that the friendship these guys have sort of supersedes whatever working relationship might be different. Will Muschamp, when he was at South Carolina, kind of the same kind of thing. So, I think Summers working as an analyst there, I don't think changes the nature of the relationship that he has with Kirby. I don't think so anyway, unless there's something that's happened between them that I'm not aware of, but I wouldn't know about that one way or another. But, the idea that, former friend of Kirby, guy that's worked with Kirby before, now working at Florida, I don't think that stirs anything up there, even though some people are acting like it does. Or anything else. Let me go back over to Facebook for a moment. Matt Rugavina says he wouldn't toss the shirt. Yeah, listen, I can't afford to be tossing shirts. So like one time, a long time ago, I lost a bunch of weight. My weight always just kind of, if you watch the show over the years, you'll see some days I'm a little thinner, some days I'm a little not. So like years ago, I got rid of a bunch of what I sort of thought of as my fat clothes. And then once I got fat again, I was like, boy, I wish I had those fat clothes back. So I learned my lesson. I ain't giving, I hate to say it this way, but I mean it half kidding, half serious. I ain't giving anything to charity anymore like that because I'm going to wish I had it back. Shelton Tucker says, what time's the game on Saturday? 2 p.m. for G-Day, SEC Network Plus. A couple more, we got to get ready to go. Keith Fold says balls and strikes need to be called electronically. Use the box, and they have the technology to adjust the box. Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm still in favor of a human doing it, although, at this point, maybe that's where we're all going. Brian Whitehead says, do you expect to see any surprises at G-Day on Saturday? So here's the question. It kind of goes back to, maybe it was you that asked the question last week. So when it comes to like breakout in a place like Georgia, you have to wonder like how do you even define breakout, under the radar, just given the fact that so many players get so much attention. Surprise be kind of the same thing. It seems like we've kind of talked about every scenario, all the way around, that it's almost hard to have a surprise. I mean, I don't want to say this, but honestly it compels me to admit, I guess what would count as a surprise if somehow JT Daniels didn't play well, if you didn't have, some pretty pass plays during the game, that unfortunately be a negative surprise. I'm going to try to stay away from that on here. What is a gorgeous Monday around the state of Georgia. Let's focus on the more, appealing, enjoyable things. But at this point in time, there's been a lot of chatter for like the, guy I mentioned during the regular show, like a guy like Carson Beck has gotten some chatter here this spring. So, him playing well at this point does not really seem like it'd be a surprise. You wonder if it's like a running back a little farther, what we think of down the depth chart, like a Dejon Edwards. Could Edwards be one of like the real, oh my gosh, surprise performers? I know a lot of people who were at the scrimmage in the summer last year ahead of the start of the season had kind of come in there talking about Jalen Johnson a little bit, former walk-on wide receiver. And then Johnson ended up, playing a little bit for Georgia this past year. That could be one of those surprise type things of, oh, wow, is Georgia giving, more of a look to someone that's not necessarily of the recruiting pedigree that we're used to seeing some of these guys have. That would be, I guess, a little bit of a surprise. Phil Rogers says, will they start at the 20 or they have kickoffs? I believe they'll start at the 20. I don't think they have, kickoffs for that, especially now that Georgia's kind of settled with its kicking situation. They'll have punts, but the punts won't be returnable. That's generally, I think, the rule they use. Shelton Tucker checking out. Good to see you there. Randy Hall says Broderick Jones will be the starting offensive tackle before season's end. That'd be a good thing if he was. Miriam Martin Corbin, I'm looking forward to seeing you there as well. Keith Folds, looking forward to seeing you in Athens on Saturday. Yeah, Chad Buchanan still upset about the Tyler Simmons thing. Yeah, listen, that'll be one we live with forever. Jermaine King says I should just wear stretchable yoga pants and shirts. Yeah. I mean, so much pandemic-related clothing, it's almost been kind of hard to kind of get back into like the normal clothing stuff. Like I'm actually wearing full dress today, and it's a little unusual after not really doing that very much. Back over to YouTube, and then we got to go. We got stuff to do today. They're going to make me work a little bit. Frank Patterson says 5-star safety Kamari Wilson just got crystal ball to UGA. What's the word on him? So we did talk about Wilson on Friday's show with Jeff Centel. Seems like Georgia's in a pretty good spot there for a guy that maybe kind of slowed down his recruiting process a little bit, but the delay does not seem to have harmed Georgia's chances with him. Go back and, if you haven't heard Friday's show yet, Jeff kind of got in pretty good detail. Nature Gator. On the subject of crystal ball being used as a verb. But go back and listen to Friday with Jeff. Good stuff on Kamari Wilson. That's probably a guy, admittedly, we have not talked about on the show enough, but it seems like maybe having some good stuff there. Grundy says, when I'm talking about my weight, you can tell I'm running out of takes. Oh, Grundy, how wrong you are. Never run out of takes. But I do think it's important to ever, to demonstrate my sort of, regular guy credentials. I'm not, someone who exists in some sort of gilded palace. I'm a man just like any other who, has challenges and goals and sometimes falls a little short of some of that kind of stuff. So, Grundy, how wrong you are on that topic. DSA1 checking in. Good to see you. B. Pethel says double or nothing black team wins on Saturday. So that's generally speaking number one defense, number two offense. I think Texas A&M, we need to talk about this in the show too. I think they're actually drafting their spring game rosters. Can you imagine? I mean, can you even imagine if Georgia was drafting its, like basically choosing sides for its spring game teams? The controversy and the content, talking about not running out of takes, the content we'd have if you're drafting players. I'm actually sort of glad Georgia's not doing that. I think certain people would handle that better than others would, but really good stuff all the way around. And DMart42 says, do we have an inactive list for G-Day yet? I mean, I guess not official, but you can, kind of figure out some of the guys that are on there. I will say this, though, about guys who are inactive now. We're going to do this on the show tomorrow. Kirby Smart used the word close to describe Marcus Rosemy-Jacksaint on Saturday. Now, listen, I ain't no doctor, to use bad grammar intentionally. I'm not a doctor, but that was a very pleasant surprise to me to hear Rosemary Jackson ain't close in Smart's mind, just given the nature of the injury that he suffered against Florida. That's pretty fun stuff. Stephen Wainwright, thanks for the kind words. Foster Moss says, there we go with the Aggies talk, y'all. Boy, I tell you what, I can't even step slightly out of bounds with some of y'all. Mike Anderson says Beck is so underrated by DawgNation just because he wasn't a 5-star. Now, you can say he was underrated by DawgNation Daily, but my gosh, we've written 7,000 stories about him at DawgNation. So I don't know that you can paint the entire website that way. If you want to come at me on the Beck thing, you might be able to get away with that. But the website in general, I mean, I feel like we had 8 gazillion stories about him. So am I wrong about this? Terrence Eberhardt, did he used to be a YouTube commenter? Has he migrated to Facebook? That's kind of interesting. Maybe I'm thinking about somebody different. Looking at Cole Martin, a 2023 defensive prospect. Terrence, thanks for bringing that to our attention. Appreciate that. Colin and Susan Richter checking in from Moultrie. Kevin Cook reminding us he had no kickoffs for G-Day. Probably have punts, but no returns, but no kickoffs there. Just trying to keep things as safe as possible. Calvin Sanders says the umps straight robbed the Braves last night, and that is true. All right, we're going to go for now. By the way, if you want more of what happened at Truist Park over the weekend with the Atlanta Braves kind of getting going there and home opening series and getting robbed last night, Atlanta News Now, AJC.com for a lot more on that. AJC.com, a lot more. Also some really interesting stuff kind of in like the political side of things, which we won't necessarily get into. The idea that Buckhead could kind of be a city carved out from the rest of Atlanta. That's kind of interesting. That's kind of going on. Look at Hideki Matsuyama's Masters win. And a lot of folks are obviously reacting what happened to the Braves and the Phillies last night. Of course, NFL Draft, we're getting closer on that there as well. So Atlanta News Now, AJC.com, our friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, bringing that to you there as well. All right, thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. The R.S. stands for Rapid Service. Find them online, rsandrews.com, for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Check out R.S. Andrews today. We will talk to you tomorrow, everybody. Thanks for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door.